In this video, I'm going to be providing a lot of answers to questions I've been receiving about the Paycheck Protection Program. And these are questions like, can I apply if my business is not affected? Where can I apply if my bank's not accepting applications? How much of the loan amount will be forgiven? But before I jump into answering those questions, a little bit about myself. My name is Navi Miraj. I am a CPA that specializes in helping real estate agents, realtors, and brokers. And normally I'm busy helping clients trying to save them thousands of dollars in taxes. But this video is specific to PPP. And some of you have watched my other video, which is more of a high-level overview of the program. And I answer quite a few questions I received when the program was initially announced close to a month ago. Before I get into the Q&A, just a quick shout out to all the positive feedback I received about that other video and all the emails I received, and all the feedback in general has been great, and I really appreciate it. But let's jump into the questions here. I'm going to start out with a basic question of just what is PPP, in case you're watching this video and you haven't seen my other video. If you want to see the other one, just go on my channel and take a look. If you need a link to it, it's just navimirajcpa.com and you'll find it there. A little less candid video I might be reading from time to time, but let's start out with what is PPP, right? So I mentioned it stands for the Paycheck Protection Program. It's a program that was put in place by the CARES Act, and at the end of the day, the government is trying to stimulate the economy, and you can apply for a loan based on your payroll costs. And before you think about that too much, yes, you as a realtor have payroll costs regardless of how you're taxed. You'll apply through a bank, you will receive loan documents, you'll execute those loan documents, and you will receive the funds. Once those funds have been received, you then have 8 weeks to deploy that capital. After that 8-week period is up, or probably a couple weeks prior to that, you will then have to apply again with your bank that you received the PPP loan from, and apply for forgiveness. So that all of the monies that you receive are hopefully forgiven. The CARES Act explicitly states that you will not have cancellation of debt income. That's kind of a accounting term, but what I mean by that is, you will not get taxed on the amount that the bank forgives. And there's a little nuance there that the IRS is sort of kind of pushing back on, but for now, as it's written in the CARES Act, you're not supposed to receive cancellation of debt income. Let's jump into some of the other questions here. So, do I qualify as a realtor? And I'm using the blanket statement realtor here, but I mean, agent or broker or what have you. Yes, I mean, the answer is simple, but yes, you qualify. I have clients that are reaching out to me or asking the questions like, oh, I thought for some reason I didn't qualify. But yes, you definitely do qualify and you should apply. Do I qualify even if my business has not been affected by COVID and sales are the same as they were prior to coronavirus? Or some of my clients, their sales are up. And the answer is yes, you can apply. So even though you've gone through this period where you had a slight dip, but things are overall okay, the government's not looking to see how your sales have been affected. They're just basing how much you can apply for on your 2019 numbers, not your 2020 numbers. Is there still funding? Yes, there is still funding. The initial first round of funding was depleted. Then they opened up a second round of funding, which actually allocates more monies to the smaller banks and local credit unions. And they actually have, some of them, plenty of money to give away, and they actually don't have clients to give that money away to. I know that contradicts what you've heard, but as of the date of this recording, the program is still funded, and I think you could apply at a local bank and still get the loan approved and receive the loan proceeds. How much can I apply for? Now this one, I'm gonna have to deviate a little bit and sort of answer the question from the perspective of how you're taxed. So the general question is, how much can you apply for? Well, you can apply for this if you're an S corporation, if you're taxed as a sole proprietor, or if you, for whatever reason, don't deduct any expenses and all you do is, claim your 1099 income and you don't deduct any expenses. Let me dissect that a little bit. So most of you out there will be taxed as a sole proprietorship, meaning you may have even created an LLC, but you are taxed as a sole proprietor. And so you fill out, and I actually have the tax form here, Schedule C when you're file your taxes, right? So this is Schedule C. It's part of your individual tax return. Says Schedule C on the top left-hand corner. And if you look at line 31 on here, it says net profit or loss. If you've got a profit there, you qualify. You would basically take line 31, divide that number by 12, and multiply that number by 2.5. And that would be the loan amount that you could apply for. Now, there's some of you out there that have formed a professional association or a professional corporation, and so your tax return probably looks more like this. You're taxed as an S corporation, and so you'll dig out this tax return and you'll see that it says 1120S on the top left-hand corner, and you'd look at line 7, compensation of officers, okay? Now, the way you calculate the amount you would apply for as an S corporation is not what's written on line 7 of your S Corp tax return. But if you have a positive number there, chances are you have payroll expense and your bank will request the documents that are required of you to apply for PPP as an S corporation. Now, if you're an S corporation and line 7 is a 0, well, that means you're not paying yourself a reasonable salary, and therefore, and you should be, the IRS says that you need to be, and therefore you're not going to qualify. So if you're a Schedule C and line 31 is negative because you operated at a loss, you don't qualify. If you are an S corporation, look to line 7, make sure there's a positive number there, then go apply, and your bank is going to ask you for what documents they want to see. Now, I mentioned a moment ago, technically you could be, well, so all of you are independent contractors as a realtor, right? But some people I'm finding out are do the following, meaning they actually just take their 1099, input it in TurboTax or some other software, and don't take any deductions, and so they just pay taxes on that gross amount that's on the 1099. If that's you, then you can apply for this as well, and all the bank is really going to ask for is your 1099 amount. And so they will take that amount, your gross commissions typically, divide it by 12, multiply it by 2.5, and that's the amount you will be approved for. Now, is the loan really forgivable? Yes. The goal is to have the loan 100% forgiven, but most of you will qualify to have 75% forgiven pretty easily. And I say that because if you look into the math and you just think about it, basically what's happening is the government's saying, hey, we'll give you 2.5 months of payroll costs, right? And then we'll give you those monies, and then you have 8 weeks, which is pretty much 2 months, to deploy that capital. Well, if you think about it, the calculation's based on 2.5 months, but you only have 2 months to use the funds. So I suspect there'll be a chunk of the money that some folks won't be able to have forgiven. But, don't get worried. I mean, if that's your concern, that shouldn't be your concern, because the amount that's not forgiven is still going to receive extremely favorable terms, meaning you'll get a 1% interest rate. You won't even have to make that first payment until 6 months later. So it's the 6-month payment deferral. Now, interest is accruing, that 1% interest is accruing from the day you receive the loan proceeds, but you don't have to make your first payment for another 6 months. And you'll have a 2-year repayment term. So I can't think of another loan at 1% with a 6-month deferral and a 2-year repayment term. Let's say you don't like those rates. Well, then, when you apply for forgiveness, the amount that's not forgiven, just give that money back to the bank. Yeah, you'll still have paid, the 1% interest, but you'll just give the money back and you won't have, any portion of the loan that has not been forgiven. Okay, here's an important one. I'm trying to apply online at my big bank and can't. Why? Well, the big banks want you to apply online. They don't want you going to their financial centers and have a bunch of people in their lobby applying for these loans. So they're making you apply online. There are two problems with this. One is, there are literally thousands of people in front of you in that virtual line of applying through through the internet. And two, another problem is if you go through a big bank is not only are you so far back in line that that bank might run out of funds before they can even approve you. Number two is if you commingled funds, and I know that's a negative word, but a lot of you do that for some reason. Realtors that run their business out of their personal account, I mean, that's okay sometimes, but the problem is if you bank with a larger bank, they don't know that you have a business, and they're not going to give you the option to even apply online. So you're not going to be able to even find access to apply for a PPP loan if you bank with a larger bank and you don't have a legit business account. Okay, so where should you apply then? Well, you should apply at a local bank or a local credit union. Local banks, as part of the phase 2 of the funding, received a big chunk of the amount allocated for PPP. So you should try to find a local credit union or a local bank. So you have like your big banks like JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo and Bank of America. Then you have your regional banks, which are still quite large, maybe like a PNC or what have you. I'm talking lower than that, like small level that only has a handful of branches in your local market or your local credit union. I live in South Florida, and there is actually a local credit union that just started taking apps about 2 weeks ago, and know firsthand that a business applied, and within 5 days they did the application, received a phone call from the bank, looked at the supporting documentation, executed the loan documents, and have funding within 5 business days. So don't believe the hype that, oh, the funds are gone, or I can't apply, or the bank's out of money. That's not true. Also regarding where to apply, you cannot apply directly through the SBA for the PPP. You would normally have applied directly to the SBA for the EIDL program, the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan, but for the PPP, it is facilitated through a bank. Can I apply at multiple banks? Yes. When you're applying, there's language that says, hey, make sure you don't have an application in or approved for a loan elsewhere. But if you go to a large bank and you go through the whole process and you hit submit, either once you hit submit or a couple days after, you'll actually get an email from them that says, hey, thanks for your application. We're trying to process these as fast as possible, but there's a good chance that we're not going to get to yours. So we encourage you to apply elsewhere. I mean, that's just proof that you can apply elsewhere. What they don't want you doing is executing loan documents at more than one bank. If the bank approves you and they told you loan docs are ready, sign on those docs. And if another bank that you applied for calls you, then say, sorry, I got funding elsewhere. Where can I find more information? This is going to sound sort of biased, but if you go to my website, it's navimiragecpa.com. I created a coronavirus, COVID page that talks about the PPP and the EIDL. Real quick about EIDL, they closed that portal. It's only available now to agricultural companies, so you can't apply for EIDL anymore. But on my website, list all that. I keep it up to date. There's over 25 frequently asked questions just about PPP and these other loan programs, and you could read the answers there, and there's more detail that I'm getting into in this video, so you should be able to sort of follow along alongside your tax documents and apply on your own. If you need my help, on that same page there's a link to my online calendar. Set 10 minutes of time with me if you want to chat about some things, or if you have some questions, I'm happy to help you out. Alternatively, you can go to the SBA's website, not to apply, but read some Q&A there and try to get your answer to your question. But on my site, again, I only help realtors and agents and brokers, and so all of my Q&A is from the perspective of a realtor, and it's written in layman's terms that I think you'd be able to understand. So, I'll try to create another video here specifically about the loan forgiveness. The reason why I haven't talked about that too much is because, well, it's still up in the air. There's a lot of rules about S corporations that are kind of out there, but for you sole proprietors or you folks that have just entered in the 1099 gross amount, they're still kind of sorting through how all that's going to work. But I'll create another video on how to maximize the loan forgiveness amount based on how you're taxed and how you filled out your PPP loan application. All right, that's about it. If you found this video helpful, I appreciate it if you would just like it or share it with your fellow realtor colleagues. If you need to reach out to me, there's tons of different ways you can get a hold of me. Just go to NaviMuradCPA.com and all my contact information is there. With that said, I will see you in the next video. Thanks.